What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We've got Demetrius Andrade, 29-0, taking on Liam Williams, 23-2, with one draw. And this fight is for Demetrius Andrade's WBO Middleweight title, 160. Demetrius Andrade is in a tough spot. Much like he was at 154, he was a WBO belt holder after beating Vanes Martirosyan. He actually gave Martirosyan his first loss. Martirosyan would lose again a few years later against Jermall Charlo and then retire and then come back to fight Triple G like in 2018, and he fought Triple G up like at 160 when he was really a 154-pound fighter. So Vanes Martirosyan, three-time title contender, is the guy that Demetrius Andrade beat at 154 to claim his first title, and it was a WBO title. I've long had a position that the WBO belt is usually the lesser of the four major titles. There are exceptions. Terrence Crawford is currently the WBO belt holder at 147, but usually the best fighter in the division is often the WBC champ or the WBA champ. Now, a fighter who's being avoided and that nobody wants to step up and take on, like a surging prospect or something, usually has to position themselves as the mandatory challenger in order to get a real shot. So if that opportunity comes through the IBF or the WBO, then it's very advantageous to get that avoided fighter one of those belts. So then it's an incentive for one of the other champions, WBA, WBC, to then fight the WBO belt holder in a unification fight. So Demetrius Andrade earns his first title at 154. He defends that title successfully against Brian Rose via like 7th round TKO. He's then supposed to fight Jermall Charlo, and this is before Jermall Charlo had any of the belts. Well, that fight was scheduled, and then Demetrius Andrade pulled out shortly before the fight because of some purse issue, some payout issue. And it would be another couple years before Jermall Charlo would get his hands on a belt. The WBC belt was his first title at 154. So there's a lot of history between Demetrius Andrade and the Charlos, and Demetrius Andrade finds himself in a spot up a weight class at 160 where he holds the WBO Middleweight belt there. And although he's a WBO champ, and that should be some honey to draw the others to come and fight you in a unification fight, that's just not the case for Demetrius Andrade right now. He's just not getting those fights. And he's on the network, DAZN, that's got, most of the traditionally best middleweights outside of Jermall Charlo, who's with PBC. So after Andrade was a 154-pound belt holder, he's then stripped of the title in 2015 due to that inactivity around the time of that Charlo fallout. And then he has a few more fights earning a lesser WBA belt, and then he eventually goes to 160 middleweight where he won a vacant WBO belt against somebody you never heard of. Trust me, you've never heard of him. Walter Katandakwa. That's who Andrade beat for the vacant middleweight WBO belt. And since then, he has defended that title 3 times, all on DAZN, and now he's defending it a 4th against Liam Williams. Liam Williams is a pretty good fighter. He's kind of in this, UK boxing bubble in a sense where you look at, his first several fights, with the exception of one fight that took place in Germany. All of his fights were in England or Wales, and that's kind of where he's been, building his profile. And then he started winning some of the Commonwealth light middleweight belt. He won the vacant British light middleweight title against Chris Carlslaw. And then he runs up against Liam Smith and loses back-to-back fights versus him. Liam Smith, the older but smaller brother to Callum Smith, you probably remember Liam Smith losing about 5-6 years ago versus Canelo Alvarez. And, between losing to Alvarez and then losing a few years later to Jaime Munguia, Liam Smith actually had these 2 quality wins. So since those back-to-back losses versus Liam Smith, Liam Williams has gone on to win his next 7 fights, all by knockout or TKO, and now he's taking on Demetrius Andrade. Well, the undefeated Demetrius Andrade is 6'1" to Liam Williams' 5'10". Demetrius Andrade's reach is 73.5 inches to Liam Williams' 70-inch reach. This is orthodox versus orthodox, but I think this is going to largely be a jab battle for much of the fight. You know, Demetrius Andrade is, you know, he is one of these sweet science hit and not get hit guys, and that's one of the reasons he's having a difficult time finding an opponent. Even though I think a lot of that is overblown, he's having difficulty finding an opponent because he's not a huge name. So even if he's a belt holder, he's one of the best round winners in boxing, I think. You know, he's running into a similar issue that I think Devin Haney's running into. The difference is Devin Haney's like 22 years old. Demetrius Andrade is now 33 years old. So he's the same age as Terrence Crawford, but Crawford's going to turn 34 before Andrade does. So the guy's a belt holder. He's got a style that is probably going to beat you because he's going to, you know, during a lot of the slow rounds, shout out to Richard Dwyer on that slow rounds reference, that's basically referring to anything where the guy doesn't get, where no fighter gets like badly hurt, knocked down. It's not like a super eventful round. It's just one of those kind of measured, the guys are just basically doing, not the bare minimum, but they're, you know, just trying to figure things out. The proverbial chess match. Well, Andrade is one of the toughest guys to beat at that game. And since that's how most boxing matches kind of evolve, that's what they evolve into, you find yourself with an undefeated Demetrius Andrade. Now, he's got tools to put people out. He has stopped over, you know, half of his opponents throughout his career. Granted, most of those, you know, stoppages and knockouts usually come early to the middle of a fighter's career. Then when they start fighting the elite fighters, they start scoring fewer knockouts, especially as they start getting into their 30s and so forth. So Andrade's boxing strategy is to keep using the phenomenal jab and your really good reflexes, your reach and so forth, move around the ring and, you know, continue to score points and dominate the rounds. His business strategy is to keep on winning, because as long as you're holding that WBO belt, you can, you know, keep on defending it against a mandatory. One of those mandatories was Sulecki, who was supposed to be Jaime Munguia's upcoming opponent before pulling out in recent days. They've recently found a replacement to go against Munguia. But Demetrius Andrade just needs to keep on holding that WBO title in hopes that he'll eventually find a unification opportunity. It doesn't look like it's coming against Jermall Charlo, who holds the WBC middleweight belt. But the really puzzling one is that it's also not appearing to happen versus Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, who currently holds the IBF belt, which he won in a vacant title fight versus Derevianchenko, in that fight that I felt Triple G lost to my eyes. And I don't feel the same way about Triple G versus Canelo. But Triple G versus Derevianchenko, yeah, I thought Derevianchenko earned that one. They gave it to Triple G. And so Triple G is a IBF title holder, and they still can't make the WBO IBF unification fight, even though both fighters are fighting on DAZN. That's the one that kind of bothers me. Especially because Canelo's dance card is full. He's trying to collect all 4 of the 168-pound titles. So it just looks like, you know, Triple G might be putting his career on pause at this late stage of the game. He's like 38, 39 years old now. In the same way that it appears Mikey Garcia has continued to put his career on pause in the hopes that he lands a fight versus Manny Pacquiao. So Demetrius Andrade has this, I'll call him a very game and very improved version of Liam Williams, who I think is obviously going to need to figure out a way to close some of the distance and to basically just put pressure on the taller Andrade. Andrade hasn't been super active. He hasn't fought since January of 2020, and in that fight, I thought he abandoned a lot of his principles. This is the fight against Luke Keeler, where Demetrius Andrade looks like he's just trying to score a first-round knockout. He is just way more reckless than he normally is. He's throwing haymakers. He's actually getting hit a little more than we're used to seeing him hit. It's almost like he he was trying to, like somebody was in his ear saying, hey, go out there and really try to look impressive, like shock the crowd, really make a statement. It looked like that's what Andrade was trying to do versus Luke Keeler. He ends up stopping him in the 9th round, but he was really trying to stop him early in that fight. And it looked fundamentally uglier than we're used to seeing Demetrius Andrade perform. But he won that fight, and here against Liam Williams, I think Liam Williams has to fight Andrade in the similar way that he just fought Alantez Fox. Alantez Fox is this 6'4" guy in the same division. This is a 6'4" middleweight, and Liam Williams basically just got in his grill and started throwing just heavy shots. He did work behind a jab, and he was able to close the distance against a much taller, again, 6'4", Alantez Fox, but he worked behind the jab, was able to get in to throw enough like over the top, overhand right power punches, and basically was able to knock Alantez Fox out in the 5th round. Now, this was December 2019. Alantez Fox had actually fought Demetrius Andrade about 2 years prior to that, and Demetrius Andrade dominated Fox in a unanimous decision win, but Liam Williams actually knocked Alantez Fox out, which I'm sure Williams is going to ride as a wave of confidence that, hey, a guy that went the distance with Andrade, I was able to get out in 5 rounds. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate in Liam Williams should be able to match up favorably and beat Demetrius Andrade, but it means that he's a real player at the table now, and that's where we find ourselves. Now, I think that Andrade's advantages are still advantages over Liam Williams. I think that he moves around the ring better. I think he has better hand speed overall. He doesn't have devastatingly fast hand speed, but it's good hand speed. Again, he's got a solid reach, 73.5 inches. That's somewhere between Errol Spence and Floyd Mayweather, who have 72-inch reaches, and Terrence Crawford and Jaron Boots Ennis, who both have 74-inch reaches. Demetrius Andrade, even though he's fighting at a higher weight class, has a reach just under Terrence Crawford and Boots Ennis. For a reference more relevant to the weight class, Jermall Charlo also has a 73.5-inch reach. So Charlo and Andrade have the exact same reach. Gennady Golovkin, Triple G, has a 70-inch reach. So Triple G and Liam Williams have the same reach. So I think that it's going to be pretty significant, but I think it's going to be the hand speed and actually the craft that make a bigger difference in this fight than just the reach alone. Again, Demetrius Andrade is going to have to, avoid Liam Williams' hard power punches, because Williams might be the harder puncher of the two. But I expect that attack from Williams to kind of slow down in the middle rounds if Demetrius Andrade is still in typical Demetrius Andrade shape, which he's given me no reason to believe that he won't be, but you just never know with these things between COVID, between, aging. Again, Andrade is now 33 years old, so this, upper bound ceiling, the absolute prime, if he's still in it, he's not going to be in it for very long. So the time is now, not only to perform well against Liam Williams and keep the title, but to also find the meaningful fights so you could, kind of bookend that stage of your career with significant wins to leave out on a super high note and to finally realize all of this talent that you've had over the past, several years and have not really been able to capitalize on in terms of your mainstream profile, even though you've held the WBO belt in 2 weight classes. So I think Demetrius Andrade is going to do that. I think that he is going to win this fight versus Liam Williams. I don't think it's going to be the most exciting fight. I think he's going to be under a lot of duress. I think Liam Williams is going to put a lot of pressure on him. But by the middle rounds, I expect Demetrius Andrade's jab to more or less take control of the fight. I can also see Liam Williams' aggression kind of waning once you hit the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. Most of Liam Williams' knockout wins are happening in the 1st round, that like in his last fight versus Andrew Robinson, or in the 2nd round against opponents like Karim Achor, and just before that against Joe Mullender. Both of those were 2nd round knockouts. And so, he's knocking out a lot of these kind of lesser-ish fighters in these early rounds. So I don't think that's going to happen against Demetrius Andrade. So if you don't get him out of there early, I expect the naturally better athlete even though he's not the harder puncher in my opinion, but the better overall boxer to kind of do his thing and to start taking control by the 7th, 8th, 9th round to where he's going to be cruising in. Maybe Liam Williams makes a strong rally in the 10th, 11th, and 12th round to kind of make the scorecards a little closer than Demetrius Andrade fights are usually. So maybe Demetrius Andrade wins in a 9 rounds to 3 fashion. I expect something like that to take place. But I expect Liam Williams to be a pressure fighter to make the early rounds interesting. But Demetrius Andrade, I think, is going to hold down the fort and win this one, but not by knockout. Even though it would be great for his cause to call out bigger names, I don't think that's in the cards here. I think he's going to win this one via decision, which is probably going to continue to make it tough for him to try to reel in the big fish like Jermall Charlo or even Gennady Golovkin. Although I really would like to see Triple G give Demetrius Andrade a shot, just on a national profile. The other play that Demetrius Andrade has, being the WBO champ, that should be able to land you a WBO title shot if you move up to 168. So he's been flirting with that, although he hasn't pulled the trigger on it yet. He's been saying, yeah, if I don't get the opportunities I need here, I'm going to go up to 168 and try to go Canelo hunting like everybody else, or just, pick off whoever might be holding a belt there. So, all in all, I just hope he does score a big fight. I want to see DAZN, the network that he's on, do right by him. He's got an excellent interview with Brian Custer. Go check that out. The guy's hilarious, so it's not like he's lacking personality, and that's why he's not famous. This guy's got charisma, personality. He just needs higher profile opportunities. And this one versus Liam Williams ain't it. So hopefully that it happens shortly after that. But yeah, let me know what you think about Demetrius Andrade versus Liam Williams. Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. Also, please let me know what you think about Demetrius Andrade and the middleweight division overall. And Triple G's inactivity. I mean, he's obviously kind of on his way out, 39 years old, but it looks like he doesn't have, interest in fighting the type of fight that the hardcore boxing fans would love to see. It looks like he wants, obviously, the biggest fight at this twilight stage of his career, and that biggest fish is still Canelo Alvarez. But I would love to see any permutation of Triple G versus Jermall Charlo, Demetrius Andrade versus Triple G, Jermall Charlo against, any of these guys. But, let's see some of it. Again, thank you for tuning in.